So the first thing I would like to do is just welcome everybody to the Soul of Synth-Pop Zoom Spotlight Series. I am your host, Jim Kelgard. That's right, Jim with two M's, one, two, count them, and a very big hey to all of you that are there. Just a little brief introduction about what we're doing here tonight. Tonight we're having a wonderful live conversation and discussion with Mr. George Pappas of Alien Skin, and also former member of the legendary Australian New Wave act Real Life. And I'm a fan of both Alien Skin and Real Life. And as George and I will discuss as we get into the event here, we have a little bit of a history that we share together, George and I, through Real Life. So all kinds of cool stuff. For those of you who don't know what the Soul of Synth-Pop Zoom Spotlight series is all about, it is a series that I do on Zoom periodically where I welcome in synth-pop musicians, synthwave, also producers, and other people that are involved in the creation and production and promotion of the genre of synth-pop and synthwave, and really pretty much all kinds of electronic pop music, which I happen to absolutely love and adore. My name, as I said earlier, is Jim Kelgard, and I am the host of a weekly radio show, internet radio show, that is hosted on Radio Plus Israel. The name of that show is The Soul of Synth-Pop. And during that show, I play a combination of classic synth-pop tunes from artists like Depeche Mode, Erasure, OMD, Kraftwerk, and also a fair shake of modern indie synth-pop and synthwave bands as well. And so my big passion really is synthesizers, synth pop, and the people who create and listen to that wonderful music. So with that, also a little more information about me. I was born and raised in New York, currently residing just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, with my wife and children. And I've been in the music industry, working professionally for about 30 years. I've been producing music. I'm an audio engineer as well as a mixing engineer, record producer, songwriter, performer, pretty much all the hats involved in the creation of music. I wear them all proudly. I do my own music on a side project called Eminent Soul, which some of you might have heard of. Kind of like a flavor of OMD meets Kraftwerk, and a little bit of other surprises thrown in as well. And unfortunately, I am also the lead singer. So, but that notwithstanding, synth pop is my biggest and my largest passion. And so, with the Soul of Synth Pop Zoom Spotlight series, what I do is I welcome in people essentially into my living room here, and maybe you can see my Gretsch guitar that I got there behind me, which also doubles somewhat as a rehearsal space and studio for me, particularly during the pandemic lockdown. So lots of fun there. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And welcoming my special guest this evening is Mr. George Pappas, again, the man who goes by the name of Alien Skin for his solo project. And he was a longtime member, keyboard player, and I even saw him pick up a guitar once or twice when he was playing with Real Life. And he's just an all-around awesome guy. He's been involved in music for a very long time. And he's truly one of my absolute favorite people in the world. George is just a really awesome, humble guy. So with that, we'll turn things over and say, welcome, George. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jim, and thank you to everyone for being here.
Yes. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. So let's start off the conversation a little bit. And George, just kind of tell us a little bit about your personal history, such as where you're from, any family details that you'd care to share, what city you're based out of now, and so on.
Well, I was born in the last year of the 50s, and that being 1959. And I was born in Athens in Greece. And my parents and myself migrated from Athens to Melbourne for economic reasons, as so many migrants did. And we traveled here by ship from Athens to Melbourne in October 1962, that's significant because that was the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. For anyone who probably is aware of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev and Kennedy, etc.
Right.
So we were right on that transit between Greece and Australia when that was all happening. Not that I was aware, but if things hadn't gone right, I would have ended up somewhere in the Indian Ocean. But things did for all of us, and ended up in Melbourne. Growing up in the 1960s, that was a good period for me. I was a happy kid. I was good at school in the 1960s, from grade 1 to grade 6. And ironically, I had no interest whatsoever in music. I did, well, to a point I detested it. Someone screamed.
What restaurant should we order? We hungry as fuck.
Someone know this person? Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Gotta love live stuff.
Yeah, I had. 1960s. Yeah, I had no interest in music. My parents coming from a different culture, Greek culture, not speaking English at the time, etc. Anything associated with rock, with English music was rubbish. Not to be involved with. I just picked up on that from them. So I had no interest. I'm not going to read that. There's messages coming up. And so it's pretty ironic for me. I've spent the rest of my life with music since 1970, but those first few years, whatever, in the 1960s, I just detested even the thought of pop music.
Right.
And I had my epiphany in 1970. We can talk about that later, but and I became very interested in music. And the 1970s for me in school suffered because I just wasn't interested educationally. I just wanted to be a principal writer in a successful band, which is not really a job. So
right.
that was a difficult time. It was frustrating. It was depressing. There was a period there when I first started to learn guitar, and I was forbidden from playing by my parents because they wanted me to concentrate on music. So that was a really angry, frustrating period in sort of the early 70s for me. At one point I had bought a little electric guitar. I don't know how I saved up for it. I did $42, and I used to hide it in the wardrobe of my bedroom on the top shelf and cover it with blankets. Just a little electric guitar. So I used to pull it out and play it when my parents weren't in the house. I used to plug it into a little tape deck that I had and use that as a monitor and crank it up because it didn't have an amplifier. But so the 1970s is where it really picked up for me. So I did okay in school, but I just wasn't interested. And my last year in secondary school here in Melbourne was 1976. I finished that, and I got a job in 1977, an administration job in a major electricity company here in Melbourne. But because I got the job, it meant school was over and I could pursue music. So there wasn't any boundaries put on me by my parents. I was kind of old enough. And I started playing a guitar in rock bands. I was a guitarist and sometimes sang and wrote. And I wanted to be Jimi Hendrix. I wanted to be Jimmy Page, etc. I wanted to be a guitar hero. I was never that good. I was competent. I was never that good. And so I pursued that for a few years till electronic music came along, and we can pick that up as we go along. And but that's my initial history up to that point.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Coming all the way from Athens to Melbourne. That's quite the trip right there.
It's a big trip, and we came through the Suez Canal. Well, obviously these days it's all air flight, but back in those days, air flight was very expensive. So families came across on ships, and it took us 3 weeks. And it was 62, so it was through the Suez closed down in '67 for a while because of the war. But I have vivid memories. There's a city, a port, whatever, called Aden around that area, which used to be a trading place, or the ships used to stop there and you used to get souvenirs and merchandise, and I remember that. I remember a woman on the ship being part of games, being dangled above the ship's swimming pool and dropped into the pool. I was 3 years old. I still remember.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember the ship going like this. It was just a 3-week trip. I still remember going through the corridors of the ship, and it was going like that. Good times. Anyway.
Good times, yes. So you mentioned a moment ago some of the great guitar players of rock history, like Jimmy Page and whatnot. But what specifically was there a series of events that kind of led you into kind of discovering music as being something that you wanted to actually pursue seriously?
Yeah, there was actually one pivotal. The first one. Okay, I had no interest in music, as I was talking about, absolutely zero. And it was 1970 that this is grade 6, last year of primary school, and our teacher, she was a nun. She was bringing in LPs, or in America, albums, for a short period, and would play a song and would discuss it in class. And there was one song that just blew me away when she played. It's a very famous song, I'll mention it, but just the melody, the melancholy of it, just a beautiful melody and atmosphere, harmonics, the dynamics of it, the performance, the singing, the piano. And there was a Bridge Over Troubled Water, okay, by Simon and Garfunkel. I'd never heard it before. It was just released, and I didn't know anything about music. I didn't care, but that moment, those 3.5 minutes, whatever, it did something to me. It just did, and ever since that song, if I could just say at the onset, the thing that has always driven me in music, always the number one thing that I love is songs and songwriting. Everything else to me comes secondary. It's always songs, and that particular song just kickstarted everything off. And from that point on, I became obsessed, as I still am today, with the Beatles. Okay, their whole catalogue, their innovations, everything they did, the whole career is still mesmerizes me. And I know quite a lot about the Beatles and their career and what they did, their innovations, their songs has inspired me since 1970 till today. Even though music I create doesn't sound like the Beatles, but what they did still inspires me as artists. Right. So it started from Simon and Garfunkel, and then it went to the Beatles. And I used to hate them in the 60s for reasons that I mentioned before about my parents and all the rest of it. Everyone likes the Beatles. They only like it because everyone else does. And,
right.
But that changed my life at that period, and I just kept on moving forward and forward.
Right on.
So yeah, as far as with guitarists as well, Jimi Hendrix, I still love his work, and I love the man as an artist. And he had such a unique style. You hear his playing, and that's Jimi Hendrix or someone trying to sound like him.
Right.
So I loved his. He wasn't just a player, the way I described it, I see it in my head, he was also a concept player. He created concepts with his guitar playing. There's a particular song that if anyone may know, may not, called Machine Gun, where emulates. He created ideas with his guitar playing. He wasn't just playing like a lot of people did. Great players like Clapton, etc. Eric Clapton, great musicians, great players, but I was never really into them. But someone like Jimmy, I was mesmerized, and still am.
Right.
And his voice too, and his songs.
For me, with guitars, it's always been about David Gilmour. I'm just such such a big fan of Gilmour's work with the Pink Floyd and even his albums. I've just been a big fan of his for years. Yeah. And one of these days, I'm going to get myself a Stratocaster.
David, and I love Pink Floyd, Pink Floyd, and I also love Sid Barrett.
Oh
the
yeah.
original,
Yep. Yep.
the,
So
the founding member.
so as far as electronic music goes, who were kind of the first ones that turned you on to electronic music? Who got your attention first?
Okay. This is the late 70s. So in the rock band that I was playing in, we called the Jinx. By that stage, it was kind of rock, new wave. And I clearly remember it very well. It would have been 1979, actually. I knew of Kraftwerk, or I knew Autobahn, but at that time, I wasn't interested. At that time, I changed afterwards, but at that time. But okay, 1979, I remember we were doing a rehearsal. We just finished our rehearsal, guitars and big amps, all the rest of it, packing up. And the guy who used to do front of house for us, called Dean, he put in his cassette player as we were packing up, and said, guys, listen to this. This is what's big in Britain at the moment. And he started playing this song, and it just blew me. I was ambivalent about it, and I'll say why. I was ambivalent, but he started playing, and it just what? That intro. It was Our Friends Electric, Gary Newman.
Ah,
okay.
Very cool.
Now to me at that time, it was like opening the door to my room and stepping into another dimension, something that I'd never, just that intro. This is 2021, all these things mean very little to us anymore. But back in those days, when you hear something that's absolutely different, and especially if you're a musician, anybody really, but you just go, wow. And just that whole song, the mood of it, the atmosphere, those synthesizers, it only went in so far, because to many of us, all that was more classic rock bands. It was very threatening at the time, okay, because this was a new movement that was taking over the old movement. So I felt threatened. So on one hand, I was really excited with this new thing. What? But at the same time, I knew that we were being, a red line was putting under our history kind of thing, being pushed out, which is what happened. But I quickly got over that. I became very obsessed with electronic music. So I had my own little mini revolution within me, where I actually ditched everything I did. I sold my guitars, my Gibson Les Paul, and other guitars. I sold my Marshall stacks, my pedals. I got rid of everything. Okay. And
Wow.
I started disliking a lot of the music that I had liked, not from the past, not the Beatles, not the classic artists. They're still precious to me. But a lot of the music I was having around the time I didn't like, and I was really obsessed with electronic music, and I started buying devices and keyboards, and I wasn't a keyboard player, so okay, pick it up from there.
That's awesome, George. It's so cool to hear somebody citing Newman as their first taste of electronic music. Because for me, it was Kraftwerk. It was about 1975, 1976, and I was a very, very small child. And my mother was listening to this radio station, and she's like, "Oh, you've got to listen to this song. There's nothing else like it out there." And it was Autobahn by Kraftwerk. And that was what immediately began my fascination and love affair with synthesizers. And so that's cool that Newman was kind of your first introduction there.
Yeah, because I was a musician. Well, I wanted to be a musician. I was a guitarist. So something like Kraftwerk, I was aware of Autobahn. It was on the radio, but it was more of a novelty song at that time for us. And being wanting to be Jimi Hendrix, etc., that's something you can like, but it's just there. It doesn't influence me. It didn't mean anything. It was just like a novelty, As I said, I changed afterwards, but at that time, I was struggling. Well, I was struggling. I was trying to better myself as a rock performer, So that was something different. It was still very early days for electronic music. I did catch up.
Right on. Now you mentioned a moment ago about one of the earlier bands that you were in. So let's just kind of talk about the days before you joined Real Life. Tell us about some of your bands that you were in before you made the jump into real life there? Just kind of give us a little history.
Well, yeah, in the 70s, it was rock bands, either with friends and just changing members. Did a number of gigs. Nothing really came out of that. And the very, very early 80s, as I said, I got rid of all my rock equipment and started buying electronic gear, synthesizers, eventually sequencers, drum machines. Okay, and I formed a band called Strange Silence. Okay, and I have to say it was a difficult transition. Putting it in context today, electronic music, computers, everything, it's so simple. Okay, anyone with skill can do things. Yeah. But back then, no. And there wasn't much of a history of electronic music. So I came from a rock background. So to transition, it wasn't even transition, it was an immediate dramatic change into electronic music. From spending so many years knowing what I was doing as a rock musician to all of a sudden, creating songs, producing, arranging in an electronic, with electronic elements was bloody difficult. It was, how do you do this? I was just thinking about it the other day, and it reminded me when I was driving for many years. I was driving an automatic car. Okay, I was driving an automatic car for 20 years, and you could drive blindfolded. And then I sold that car and got this other small manual car with gears and clutch and all the rest of it. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I could barely drive. So after 20 years of being an expert on the road, to all of a sudden feeling like a beginner, it was really frustrating till I got a hang of this manual car. Oh, I was such a good driver. It was the same with music. I could do things in a rock mode. I knew what I was doing, constructing songs and all the rest of it. All of a sudden, electronic music is totally different. You don't create songs, and the production, the arrangement, it's not the same thing. There's nothing like it. So that took quite a while to get the hang of how to actually, I could write a song, but actually to arrange it, what parts to play, what does this, what does that.
Right.
It took.
And I remember, you got your start in music at least a decade before I did. But I remember still growing up, the first band that I joined was in the late 1980s, and it was all electronic. And there was nothing like the various resources you could go to today to figure out how to program a synthesizer or how to properly do a sequence. What is the difference between MIDI and audio? And big surprise, they're not the same thing. It's like, so I can definitely relate to what you're saying there. The early days of being an electronic musician must have presented its own set of challenges that are so much so far removed from today.
Yeah. But I think anyone who's been through it would say the same thing. That I'm glad I went through it.
Me too.
Because absolutely. Anyone growing up today, it's fantastic because the opportunities are there, the tools are there. That's great. I'm not against it, but I also enjoy the fact that I went through the hard times. So I've learned the hard way and appreciate what's available today.
That's right.
And I can only imagine what, say, people back in the 1960s, working with 4 tracks and then 8 tracks and coming up with ingenious works, like Sgt. Pepper's and Pink Floyd's work. And we're talking about such limited technology and what they did. I got to hand it to those people, So yeah. But it was, and also back in the late 70s, early 80s, whatever equipment you bought was expensive, and each piece of equipment did one thing. It's not like computer and software that you got in front of you and you can do everything with a. Right. One thing you bought did one simple thing, and then you've got to buy something else to do one simple thing.
Yeah.
And I was using an MC4 sequencer that Vince Clarke used to use. You may still use it, And those things were very volatile. There's no memory. There was no memory. Okay, so the way to save things was on a cassette. It would give a tone like a fax machine, and then when you set it up at a gig, you have a cassette player and you fed this tone into the sequencer to load it up.
Yep.
And places we played at, many places, the power supply was always notorious. It would go off even for a split second, and down would go the MC4. That happened on 2 or 3 occasions. I remember that.
Right.
You would jump around too much on the stage, and it would just
Yep.
there'd be cables on so power plugs on the wall.
Yeah.
A little bit too much jumping, boom, there goes the show.
Yep.
So, you don't get this anymore, which is great. But it was still, it was still fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being the transition from being a rock musician to being electronic back in the early 80s. It was sort of, I think, the only time I felt cool, because I felt ahead of the curve here.
Right.
In Melbourne, Australia, I know also in America in the early years, well, certainly here, there was a lot of hostility to electronic music. So it was
Oh, yes.
it wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy. Only the people who liked what I liked were, interested, but the industry wasn't interested, right? There was a big backlash,
Well, for
against
years,
anything electronic.
yeah, for years. I mean, and again, I didn't get my start until the mid to late 1980s, and I was constantly being badgered and bullied by people in my hometown that were quote unquote real musicians, because anything with a
Yeah.
synthesizer or any kind of electronic music tool, sampler, sequencer, drum machine, vocoder, it was a toy. It wasn't really, you weren't allowed to play with the big boys, as they would say, because you weren't playing a guitar or a bass or whatnot. And of course, I always used to fight back and say, well, at least with my drum machine, the difference between my drum machine and your drummer is I only have to punch the information in once. And
There was, Look, I lived through a lot of that, because I was doing gigs here in Melbourne, and there was a lot of, it was difficult. It was very difficult, but I persevered. I loved what I was doing more than anything I did before musically. I really loved it. Just to get on stage, and just even the sound check, especially if it was a decent setup on stage, just to hear, just in the sound check, just to hear those sequences loud.
Right.
This is early times. It's not like now. You think nothing of it anymore because it's also passe. But back in those days, when everyone is so used to, I was so used to just hearing guitars and drums everywhere. To hear this stuff live and loud, I remember some of those sound checks, just stepping back and, wow, this is fantastic, and I loved it.
Absolutely. Well, tell us. Let's talk just a little bit about how do you go about starting to write songs? When you started writing songs, did you find it was a kind of a natural progression for you to get into writing your own songs, as opposed to?
Yeah, very natural. Look, I'll tell you, it all began by again with the Beatles. It started about 1971. Like, this is those early records of Beatles and others were in faux stereo. There was vocals on one side, music on the other side. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, again, very vividly, it's about 1971, I would write different lyrics to their songs. I remember it was Please Please Me and I Should Have Known Better. I remember those 2 songs.
Right.
And I wrote my own lyrics to their melodies, okay?
Oh.
So I would put the record on my parents' big furniture gramophone, as existed in those days, and turn the vocals off, because you could turn the vocals off because the vocals one side, music. So I would just hear the music. And then I would get my little tape deck. I had this little tape deck with a little toy microphone, and sit in front of the gramophone, play the record, the music of Please Please Me, etc. And I would sing my lyrics to their tune. So that's how I began writing music. I couldn't write music, so that's how I began writing songs. And about 1971, 72, I began learning how to play guitar, acoustic guitar. And as soon as I knew some basic chords, I started writing from the age of 12 or 13. So, you know, they weren't good songs, but they were, you know, it got me into the process of writing, and I've never stopped. That's, as I said before, my number one love is writing songs.
Yeah.
And now, well, the last few decades, I love writing songs with electronic music, you know, but it's always songs. I can begin a song in any way. It could be creating some ideas, some simple ideas electronically, and then try and sing something over it. Or I can start with an acoustic guitar or a piano. It just all varies. There's no. If you only have one way, sometimes it just gets boring. So just whatever.
I've actually found that out for myself. It used to be that when I would start composing a song, I would start on just a piano, because I had this own personal philosophy of mine that no matter what song I write, I want to make sure that there's actually a song in there and not just a bunch of, interesting sounds and cool funky beats. I want there to actually be something that if, I couldn't use a synthesizer, or we lost all ability to have electricity, I'd still be able to sit down at a piano or a guitar and actually play a song. So, but I've also in recent years, sometimes I admit I sit down to my DAW and I'll pull up some of my favorite software synthesizers, and all of a sudden I'll just hit a patch that just really, no pun intended, strikes a chord with me. And
I agree. I'm the same. Absolutely. Yeah. It all depends. It all depends. Yeah. Sometimes, I'll just trigger something off on pad sounds, whatever. And that inspires. Yeah. I think we're all the same. I'm sure you're aware also that people like, Martin Gore, Vince Clarke, they write a lot of their songs on guitar because they want to make sure it's a good song to begin with.
Right.
Before you start investing time, producing something, you want to make sure that it's. But that, having said that, I don't do that all the time. I mess around with the keyboards and grooves, and if something works, then I'll develop it further. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I've got a big backlog of things that just never went anywhere.
Right.
It's
good to just simply, as you said, do what inspires you, because sometimes, I'm just now starting to come out of a massive years-long battle with writer's block, where I haven't been able to even sit down and compose anything, and I'm just now getting through that. And some of the things that are inspiring me the most are some of the brand new software synthesizers that I've found, and it's like I'll play a chord or I'll play a bass line or something, and it's like, oh, that's just absolutely magical, and I'll then figure a way to throw together some type of a chord progression or whatever. But yeah, wherever I say, the wherever you find the inspiration, however, whatever process works for you, that's what you should stick with, right?
Well, I find also different type of songs emerge from the way you begin a song. Not always, but they do. If I start something totally on a guitar, it'll probably end up being different to something if I started off with some kind of groove. It'll be a different type of song. Not always, but
right.
I tend to find that.
Definitely. So let's talk about your years with Real Life and how you came to be in the company of David, Danny, and Alan.
Well, okay. I was a fan many years before I joined Real Life. Okay. I was a fan. I didn't really know the guys. I didn't know. It goes back to 1982. Are you people familiar with? They had some hits in the States with the Australian band Icehouse.
Oh, they're one of my all-time favorites. Iva Davies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was a big fan of their early stuff. Anyway, the first album was just called Icehouse. I think that was a big hit in Australia. And radio stations will pick a song or two off an album. Well, they used to anyway. Things have changed, but radio, terrestrial radio stations. We'll pick a song or two, and that would play those songs. With that album, I think every single song got a lot of airplay on Australian radio. Every single song, bar one.
Yeah.
The airways were saturated. That was a great album. I love that album. That album blew me away. It was a new wave and synth dominated and fantastic songs. Absolutely loved that album.
Yeah.
Anyway, I loved Icehouse. Actually, I had seen that band before they were Icehouse. They were, I think, from one of the
Flowers.
other cities. I can't
Flowers,
remember city. Yeah. And they were doing a lot of covers. This is 1979.
Wow.
I saw them with some other bands at the time. And I think it was all covers, okay. And then Ivor started writing songs, and wow, you know. So I went to see a concert in 1982 where they were headlining, okay. And I was excited about that. And this support band, we didn't know who they were, started playing, okay. And they played one song, and I thought, oh, yeah, I like this. They played two songs. I just kept on getting excited about this band. I had never heard anything like them. Again, this is 1982. These are early days, and there was nothing like what they were doing. This is real life.
Right.
They were, heavily sequenced. There was a lot of synthesizers. There was nothing, literally nothing like that live that I had seen or anywhere around. They were different to Icehouse. Icehouse weren't like that. Real life was very heavily they sounded like things I was hearing from England, from Britain, the records, and they really sounded so modern. It's just exactly what I wanted. So when I was actually I walked away from that gig with one name. That was Real Life. It wasn't Icehouse. So they, I knew Icehouse. I loved Icehouse, but this new band, I was so excited. So I got home that night, and the first thing I did was we used to have these small little booklets, which were gig guides, which would have performances of different venues. These are the bands for the next week, and it used to be these free little booklets. You used to pick up from the street or whatever. And so I checked out where they were playing, and they were very busy. Real Life. Very busy, playing a lot of gigs around Melbourne. They'd actually established a name for them very early on, which I didn't know about. So that was Friday night. So I found a gig on Saturday. So I went to see them Saturday. And if they played Sunday, I would have gone on Sunday. I used to go and see them about 4 or 5 times a week. And I was just blown away. It was exactly what I wanted to do, And possibly that was the first time I realized that's what I wanted to do musically. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'd never seen or heard sequenced synthesizers on stage. I didn't know what that was. I knew about arpeggiators, right?
Right.
On a synthesizer. I knew about arpeggiators because at the time I had a Korg Poly 6 with that's a nice synthesizer. Mm-hmm. And that had an arpeggiator, right? But Richard, the original keyboardist, Richard Zatorsky, so he had an MC4, So I didn't know about this at the time, but I learned later. So all these sequences are playing, melodies. And I thought, how does he do that? I can't do that with my arpeggiator. I can't play melodies. I can only play octaves, etc.
Yeah. So
all these things were going through my head. How on earth do they do that? I was really blown away with a lot of synthesizers. The JP8s, but so many things were being triggered and played, and and those beautiful JP8 string sounds.
Oh,
they have some, played loud. And again, this is very early days. It's not today, so we've got to take our minds away from what we know today. This is very early on. So everything is so blasé. You've heard it a million times, but back then, no, it was something totally new. So I became a very big fan. I followed them around everywhere, and I was there on one of the gigs in 1983 in a pub. They used to get a good attendance. They were a good attended band before they even signed. This is before signing a contract. And I was there on the night in 1983. I don't know, about June. when David Sterry said, "We've got a new song here. This is Send Me an Angel." So, so I was there on that very first night when they introduced the song. You know, it'd never been played before. This was the first time they played it, so I was there. So that was you know, of course, no one knew. The band didn't know. I didn't know. The fans didn't know that that would become such a legendary song.
Right.
You know, but I remember very clearly, and of course it really resonated because of that fantastic D minor riff of Richard. Da, 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 da. You know, that as soon as that started playing, it was.
I have to ask, do you know, did he originally do that on a Prophet 5, or was it a
No. Well, it was recorded on JP8.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, that was, yeah, they were his he had a couple JP8s, yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I distinctly remember that evening when I first heard the song, and it was the riff just kick-started, and everything else was just magic on top of that. You know? Okay, so they carried on with their career, and they kind of disappeared from the scene here. They were in America a lot, touring with the Eurythmics and elsewhere, and yeah, they lost ground here. How did I get to meet with them? Through a mutual girlfriend. My girlfriend at the time, this is 1990. I was going out with a woman, not a girl, who used to be the girlfriend of Danny, the drummer, many years ago. And that was the connection. So she introduced me to Danny, and we became friends and started playing, you know, music to each other, etc. And in a few years, they stopped touring. Actually, they stopped as Real Life, more or less, or hiatus, let's say, in 1990. There was unfortunate record company and management issues, and they separated from those, and they weren't doing anything for a few years. The keyboard player had left, so it was just Danny, David, and Alan on bass, and they were considering putting an album together. Okay, so Danny, there was one particular song that you know, Jim, called Meltdown from the Happy album.
Right.
Okay. And which was co-written, it was a co-write between David and Danny. Okay. And they were going to record that, and Danny gave me a call saying, you know, can you help on this? And so I got the song, and I added I added some more parts to it. And I rearranged it a bit, and went to the studio and recorded it. And that was a real pleasure to actually record. It was essentially David, Danny, and myself, and the engineer. That was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure to see and hear David recording his voice, because I always loved his voice.
Right.
So it was a real pleasure being in the studio, watching him do all that, and so that worked out well. We had a good relationship, working together and in the studio, and it was a lot of fun for me. I mean, it was a thrill for me because they were always such a big band to me, and I thought that was more or less going to be the end of it. And then they had ideas of starting touring again, or starting to play again. They didn't have a keyboard player. So they had contributed a couple of songs to a compilation album with this synth community, and then a little show was put together with half a dozen bands who were on this compilation, and Real Life was one of them. Okay, so we're going to do half an hour. They didn't have a keyboard player, and David asked, "Can you do it for us? Can you fill in? We haven't got a keyboard player. Can you fill in?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." Now, when I committed myself to that, you don't fill in. When it was a band like Real Life, you don't just fill in. There's nothing to fill in. You have to create it.
Right.
Like there was nothing there, so I had to go. But this is half an hour, so I don't know, 6, 7, 8 songs. I think maybe 10 songs. I had to go back to old records and try to analyze them and work out all the part sequence, get the sounds, the logistics of how to do everything. This is pre-computers. So I remember working night and day for about 3 weeks non-stop. I was exhausted putting the show together and working out how I'm going to do this, figuring what I'm going to play, all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out. It worked out fine. We spent a few rehearsals before the night, and it just worked out really brilliantly. And it was just a small audience, and it felt great for me personally. And the feedback on the night was excellent. Everyone said that it was like real life had never stopped playing. It just felt so natural with me in the band as well, and I found very much at home. So yeah, it was a good fit. And after that, we did another gig like that because I put in all the work. And this is at the end of '96. David Sterry said to me, "Okay, we're putting an album together. Have you got any songs?" All right. So the way David co-writes everything. The way he had worked and continued to work afterwards was he'd work with the keyboardist who would create the bed of a track, and he would take that away and create melodies and lyrics,
Right.
and then and then rearrange things afterwards. So I said, yeah, sure. So he visited my place. So we went through. I had heaps and heaps and heaps of music. So I just selected some that I thought would probably maybe work. So he chose a number. He took them away on cassette, and he wrote melodies and lyrics and gave them back to me. And I just reworked the songs with those vocals, and they ended up. A lot of them ended up as Happy, the album Happy.
Nice.
Which we recorded in '97. It was released in Australia in '97. In America, 1998, which led to our first tour, my first international tour. We visited, we did 5 weeks. We did some shows here too in Australia, but we did, I think, 5 weeks in America, which was fantastic. I love that. And then we went immediately to Germany and continued there for another 3 weeks.
Wow.
So from that point on, I was in real life, and we did another 2 tours. Synth-Pop 2000 with Jim and OMD. There was a special one as well in 2004, and yeah. But that's how things led up to.
Cool.
So
Tell me a little bit about what it was like for you coming to America for the first time and
look, it was.
What did you think of Salt Lake City? I have to ask.
I loved it. What I loved was the fact that there was so much love for the music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were. I'm sure they still are mad for what we did, and electronic, synth-based music. They're very, very passionate. I remember the gig. I can't remember where it was in '98, but I remember that particular show with people lining up out the front. That was fantastic. I really loved it. Coming to America, just being international, but America is a great place because when you tour there, people who like you really show it, and they really show it. So I'd never had that kind of response, personally. The other guys had, of course, but I personally had never had that kind of response to anything I did.
Right.
But coming to America and was just it was a dream come true. I always wanted to tour internationally, and it was the audiences that made it. I just had a ball. We all did, and it was really enjoyable being just on the road, itinerants. We did a lot of traveling. Yeah. And the horseshoe starting from LA, going all the way down New Mexico, blah blah blah, and coming up the East Coast to New York. And I have great memories, and that's where Jim and I first met.
And I have to say, one of the coolest moments was learning that when I met you in the summer of '98, that you also had an Ensoniq ASR-10, because that
Yeah.
at the time that was pretty much all that I was using. I had
Mhm.
that and a JP 8000 and I think a Juno 106. But seeing you, of course, Real Life being one of my favorite bands, seeing the keyboard player from one of my favorite bands playing an ASR-10 was really cool. And then of course getting to know Danny and Alan and David, and seeing that Alan always does gigs with his shoes off. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's such a quirky, cool little thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
but the really fun time was, of course, in 2000, like you said, when we did Synth Stock and road tripping with you and your bandmates from LA to Salt Lake City, driving through Las Vegas, and just I think Alan was, I believe Alan was in the car with me, and we started singing Kenny Rogers tunes or something like that, just like really horrible karaoke stuff. And we hadn't even been drinking, believe that. But I know my mother was a very big fan of yourself, and also Danny and Alan and David. And
She was a dear woman. I remember her well because the drive was a long one, so we did spend quite a few hours all together. So she was a dear woman.
yeah, she loved your music dearly, and every time that I would mention, doing my radio show, she's like, "Hey, do you ever see or talk to the guys from Real Life, and tell them I said hello?" So as recently as January, she told me to pass on her best regards to you. And of course, for those who don't know, my mom sadly passed away a few months ago, but she was a huge fan of you personally, and the band, and the wonderful music that you guys created. So on behalf of her, thank you
Um,
for all those great
yeah,
memories.
no, she was a lovely woman. I do remember her very well. I do.
Yeah. So tell us about Alien Skin. How did Alien Skin come about? Just kind of give us a little information on that.
That came about after we did Real Life did the last overseas tour was 2004
Right.
to promote an album we had just recorded called Imperfection. So we did a number of shows there, and we came back, and in 2005 we disbanded. David still continues as Real Life, and he does various 80s type of reviews, come shows, and he travels the world. He's been to the United States quite a few times, Europe, Singapore, etc. So he has a ball doing that. But the band, as it was, 2005 was the end of it. There just wasn't anywhere else to go, really. The way it was reached the end of the line with that. Yeah. So that was 2005, and well, I had no commitments to write music for Real Life. So I just wanted to obviously continue and do things myself, and create the type of songs that I preferred to create, to write, and I sang them myself, so that they were different to Real Life. So I had a bunch of songs. This is 2006, 2007, and I approached a different drum label out of not Salt Lake City, Provo in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, they released my first album, Don't Open Till Doomsday, which did well for me, to introduce me to people via MySpace. MySpace was the place to be back in those days. It was the first social media,
Right.
and it was very musician friendly. So it gave me my start really musically as Alien Skin. So a number of the fans that I picked up through MySpace, are still with me. But so I've just been recording ever since. And I enjoy the freedom, the absolute freedom of working alone and creating music myself. It's my passion, it's my hobby, it's my everything. When something works well, I take great pride because I know that's me. And I just love the process of creating, and I do that alone.
Right.
And I make all the choices. If things aren't good, well, I'm to blame. If things are good, then pat on the back to me.
So
that's.
How did you come up with a name for Alien Skin?
The name was actually it was a preset. Okay, the idea of the name was a preset on one of the keyboards. I can't remember, on Reason. I know that you use Reason.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. Now I can't remember what it was, but it was a preset called Alien Fur, right? Alien Fur, and I just played around with it and made it Alien Skin.
Nice.
And basically, that we often wear an alien skin to really hide who or what we are inside, and what people see from the outside is not necessarily who you are, etc. So yeah, just sort of a play on that.
Right.
So it came from the original word alien anyway, came from a preset. It was Alien Fur. And I started writing it. Okay, on the first album, on the last track on the first album is a song called Alien Skin. So actually, I did that song first. Sorry, I did that song Alien Skin, and then I decided to call myself Alien Skin from the song. But those actual two words really came from the preset. And the song started off as Alien Fur, but became Alien Skin, and I just kept the name as my working name as well.
Cool. So how does is the process that you use to compose music now with Alien Skin any different than it was in your previous years? Is there, I mean, aside from the benefit of technology that you have now that you didn't have in the early days, is it still pretty much the same process that you use to approach music?
Well, I'm a lot better than I was back then, so it comes far more easily to me. I know what to do. Things are so sophisticated, technologically wise, that I can come up with ideas far more faster than I used to. But a lot of songs are also written, as I was saying, on a guitar or a piano sound. So similar, except for the fact that technology has made it so much easier, as it should. And I feel, anyone who has the equipment feels like they're in the studio. Whereas back in the 80s, you didn't feel like you were in the studio. You just felt you're in front of some clumpy equipment. Right. And you would hope that one day someone would want to record you and make you sound good. That's how it was. Because you couldn't do it yourself. You just couldn't, unless you were a multi-millionaire and you had your own studio and your own 24-track, etc. You couldn't do it. Whereas now you're just at home, like I am, like everyone is. Turns on their computer and you can do it. You can record and release, which is great, But it wasn't like that back then. Yeah. You're just faced with, as I said, clumpy equipment that you couldn't do that much with, apart from maybe getting ideas together. You couldn't finish a project yourself. You couldn't do vocals, for instance. Now everyone can record vocals at home. You couldn't really do that back then. You couldn't.
Right. No, absolutely. So let's kind of shift the discussion there and talk a little bit about your workspace and your studio for a moment. What are some of your favorite synthesizers or music making tools that you have in your?
I stopped being a train spotter or a synth spotter, whatever, device geek many years ago. I used to be. But I'm not. I'm very happy with what I use, and I just keep on using it. For instance, to record, I've got on a PC, I've got Cubase, and still an old version, 8.5. I don't know what it is these days, but when I first started hard disk recording, which was 2000, I was trying to access everything and anything, just because it was so exciting. Mm-hmm. Things that did the same job, but they had a different brand name, and they just kept on trying that. I could spend a day trying different plugins on one part, for instance, that did the same job, but it looked different on screen, a different design. So, something, no, I want to try that. No, I want to try it. No, I want to try it.
Right.
After a while, I just got sick of that. I've settled to what I use, and I keep on using it. So I use Cubase 8.5. I've been using that exclusively to record and with VST instruments since 2017. Before that, I was using Reason.
Mm-hmm.
So many of my albums were done on Reason. But in 2017, I worked on it so much that I just wanted a change. Anyway, so that all my gear is software. So all the synthesizers, everything's software, and I just have a keyboard controller. I'm very happy working that way. I know what I'm doing. I feel I'm good at it. I don't have to think hard to, I know where to go. So it makes it easy. And as I said at the beginning, the most important thing for me is to get the song.
Right.
And if I got the song, everything hopefully works. And I'm happy with the equipment I have. I know it. And that's, I do get new things every now and then. I remember you mentioning the poly, what do they call it? The
Poly mode. Yeah. The
poly mode. Yeah.
Cherry audio. Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I got that because you mentioned it. So it was cheap. It was $24 or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got that, Yeah, that's good. I've used that in a few songs.
Fantastic. So now you've been fortunate enough to have done some really cool collaborations throughout the years with some really amazing people, such as Steve Kilbey of the Church, and just a whole bunch of wonderful artists. So what are some of your of all the collaborations that you've done in the past? Who are some of your favorite collaborations that you've worked with?
Well, I haven't really done that much. I haven't really done that much of named people, but you mentioned Steve Kilbey, and that is my highlight. Steve Kilbey's a lead singer and songwriter and brilliant artist from an Australian band called The Church, who have been going since 1980, and in America, probably best known by the single Under the Milky Way.
Right.
But the man is incredibly talented as an artist, like a painter as well. He's very well known in Australia, at least in the industry. He's a big name. Mm-hmm. So also I've been a fan of The Church since the beginning. They are actually my personal number one Australian band is The Church.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So to get to work with him. How did it start? Yeah, so that is my favorite collaboration. I've done 3 songs with Stephen. How it started was probably about in 2009. An American producer called Pocket. Okay, mm-hmm. He released. He sent out 10 of his tracks, just music, to different singers across the world, and asked them would they contribute, write a song on top of his bed of music. Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of them was Steve Kilbey. There was another one from Primal Scream and various people. Mm-hmm. And okay, so one of them was Steve. So Steve recorded, he wrote a lyric and melody over Pocket's bed. So anyway, so this guy had all these songs and he wanted to release the album with all these different singers, but he wanted remixes. So he sent, because he had approached David Sterry from Real Life. Mm-hmm. He had sent David these songs and asked David, pick a song. Do you want to remix one of these songs? And David wasn't interested. So he passed it to me. This is 2009. He passed it to me. So I went through the songs and I said, Steve Kilbey. Oh, yeah. So what I did is I did a remix of that song called Here in Noiseville. Anyway, so I did a totally different approach to it, my Alien Skin way. The original was something totally different, but I did a very atmospheric version of this song. And Steve really liked it. I'd never met him, so he really loved it. So he said, I love this. He said, do you have any music at all that, we can collaborate on? So I had just finished a piece, and I sent him the music, and he wrote a great song I really love called Summer of Love.
Summer of Love, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think, beautiful. You know? So I had the music, the bed basically. So he constructed the melody and the lyric, which I thought was, I loved it. It took about a year. I didn't hear from him because he was so committed with other things. So a year later, he said, "George, you know, this is it." I said, "Wow, okay." So I reworked everything and put it together, and we released that. And I love that song. It gets a lot of streams, still a lot of downloads. It's a great track, kind of good collaboration, which I really love. And then we did another one called Alien. He named it after me, Alien, with full stops between each letter on one of his albums. So again, he asked for a song, just a bit of music. I gave him that. He really liked. And he put guitar over it and vocals on one of his albums. So yeah, that's a highlight because I've always loved Steve Kilbey, you know, as a songwriter and a performer, a singer, and everything. So he's my number one.
Fantastic. So tell us what does the future hold for Alien Skin? What do you have that you're currently working on? Anything you can share with us?
Well, I released my recent album called Cold War Pop, and I've got another album that I've already finished, which I'm going to release later in the year, which is a continuation of what I've been doing the last 2 or 3 years. I had this spurt of creativity, which kind of died down. My wife Irene died last August of cancer,
So
and
sorry.
yeah, thank you. For a period after that, I was very active writing. It worked for me. It was good for me, and I finished an album. After that, I really lost it. I went blank for many months. I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to do anything for many months.
Understandable. So
Yeah, but the first couple of months, I was able to write, and I finished an album. So if it wasn't for that, I'd probably have no new music. So anyway, so I've finished an album, which it's going to be called "I Want to Be a Teenager in 1981." So that kind of points to what it's going to sound like. So it's more or less a continuation of Cold War Pop and its predecessor, New Romance 1984. That particular one was an album of songs that were actually originally written in the 1980s that I used to play, but perfected today. They weren't that good back then. But so I wanted to capture the spirit of that period, and I had the wonderful voice of Aidan Casterly from Ireland contribute backing vocals, and he's stunning with his voice. He puts me to shame, but I'll keep him in the background. So yes, I've got that new album. I Want to Be a Teenager in 1981 coming out later. Yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Fantastic. So just to throw a fun question out there, what is your all-time favorite Kraftwerk and your all-time favorite Depeche Mode album?
Okay, well, Kraftwerk, it would have to be Trans-Europe Express.
Good choice.
1977. I love that. I love the songs on it. Songs like Hall of Mirrors and Showroom Dummies and
Europe Endless.
Yeah. That whole album. I love Kraftwerk. I love all their work, but that really possibly the first one I got. I can't remember, but that really, I still love it. Still love it to death. I love it very much. Depeche, Black Celebration.
My man.
would be the one for me. I became very obsessed with Depeche Mode. I wanted to be Depeche Mode in the 80s. I learned so much from their work. They were so unique in their day, just absolutely nobody could touch them in what they were doing in the studio and live, the way they were doing it. They did not become a hybrid band till later. In the 80s, they were an electronic band, and they did it live in the same way. And I love that, Yeah, we went separate paths after the early 90s, but in the 80s, I was very, very much influenced and educated by Depeche Mode. I would spend so much time with headphones at night, just going through the albums, listening to every part and how they did this and how they did that, why they did this. I just learned. And, but yeah, Black Celebration is the one that really peaked it for me. I just, I loved all they did in the 80s, but that was just a beautiful album.
I completely agree. What I always tell people is Kraftwerk made me fall in love with the synthesizer, but Depeche Mode, and specifically after hearing Black Celebration, is what made me want to make a career out of making electronic music. And there's just an emotion, a depth of emotion on Black Celebration that I don't think any of their other albums really, where everything just gels together as well as it does. And to this day, no other album in any other genre moves me as much as Black Celebration. It's my desert island album. If I could only ever have one album to listen to the rest of my life, hands down, and it's not even close, it would be Black Celebration by Depeche Mode. That album literally changed my life. It truly did. So that's cool. That's cool.
No, I love it. Yeah, that was. It took about a listen or two for me to really get into it, because it was different to what they were doing before. The first, I remember the first thing, the song itself, the first song, that they used a lot of reverb on that album, and parts weren't as distinct, like kick drums, for instance, weren't as distinct. So it took me a couple of listens to get myself prepared to enjoy, which I did, of course. Right. But it was different to Some Great Reward and to Construction Time, where it was more, everything was cleaner.
Right.
Whereas with Black Celebration, there was a lot more ambience, a lot more reverb, and so it took a couple of listens. But as soon as that initial difference was overcome, wow. Yeah, brilliant.
My favorite track off the album, I think, is to this day remains "Here Is the House." I love everything about that track, but I think the one that really drew me in on the album initially was "Stripped." Just everything about that track just gives me the chills. But my all-time favorite Depeche Mode song, though, believe it or not, is not on that album. My all-time favorite Depeche Mode song is actually "The Sun and the Rainfall" off of A Broken Frame, which is another grossly underappreciated album by so many people. And that's one of my big complaints about Depeche Mode now, is that they basically ignore that album. And I can understand the reasons for wanting to do so, but I like that stuff.
Well, so anyway, look, that last track, Rain and that really floored me. I remember that. I mean, it still does. It's just it's more than a song. Yeah. To me, it's more than a song. It is an experience. That album, that album is a kind of a mixed album, because Martin was forced into songwriting, as people probably know, maybe, after Vince left, and he was asked to pull out songs from his past because they had to do an album. So there's this disparity between the darker songs and the more poppy songs. It's like almost like two albums.
Right.
But I love the album. But that song is it's just gorgeous. It's just an experience.
It truly is something special.
Anyone who likes that type of music or whatever, cannot fall in love with that. That's just mesmerizing. I love it.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. So our final question before we open up the floor to our wonderful participants here. George, do you like bunnies?
Do I like bunnies? Well, if you mean meaty bunnies that run around, no, because I'm a vegetarian. If you mean chocolate bunnies like Easter bunnies, no, because it's not good for my health. If you mean Playboy bunnies, I've never met one, but I probably would like. Yes, that's one of them.
No, I'm talking about the little, ears and a cottontail. So
Well, they're okay if they're alive. If I'm not going to eat
yes.
them.
Oh, I don't eat them myself either. So
I do remember actually when I was young. This is back at about 1967. My dad had one or two rabbits in the backyard, but because they would eat everything,
mm-hmm.
I know it was one rabbit. Apparently, he strangled it. He killed it.
Oh,
So that was a bit. But that's what people did. You know, I remember that. I didn't see it, but
right.
you know.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, George. That wraps up the interview portion. What I'll do now is for the next couple of minutes, we'll open up the floor to any of the wonderful live participants that we have here. If you have a question for George or for myself, please feel free to just put your video on and just simply wave your hand, and I'll let you ask your question for either George or myself. So the time is now yours, folks. Go ahead. Anyone?
Jeremy's kids have a question.
Oh,
David.
go for it. David.
So I was going to say, Jeremy's being stalked by his kids, so he's got to watch his back there. George, I'm fascinated by your story because we are of a similar vintage, and I was not a professional musician, but shared the same sort of fascination that you did with the Beatles, Floyd, some of those amazing bands in the 70s, Emerson, Lake and Palmer just made my jaw drop. And like you, had this sort of moments which just change everything. And one was Cabaret Voltaire, and the next was Severed Heads. And what they had in common was that they did things in such a left field way. They were doing things which you'd just not heard before. You could be in this sort of rhythm of hearing the same sort of thing. And that band sounds like this band. And then you were complimented because that sounded like this band. They didn't sound like anything. And I detect in you that you had these similar sort of points where things just suddenly get fresh and you have these sort of epiphany moments. And long question, but a few years ago, there was some sort of survey that was in the press saying that people don't change their musical taste after they hit 30. And I read this and I thought, am I some sort of freak? Because I like everything that's coming and everything that's happening that's new, and all the previous stuff as well. You seem to have that same sort of fresh activity where your taste and your creativity stays fresh. Are you a freak, or are we all closet creatives? I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, I actually disagree with a lot of people. My views are very maybe too left field. I don't, to be honest, I don't really like a lot of present music. I don't really, or at the very least, I don't listen to it. I don't listen to it.
Yep.
You know, being 62, I've heard quite a lot. I know there's new things to hear, but I know what I like, and to me, my biggest pleasure is creating, like a solitary painter working in his room, whatever. I just like creating. I'm not a big name artist by any means. I don't, so all I've got at the end of the day is something I've produced, and that's a great joy to me. It's like what is a hobby. At the end of the day, if something I've created pleases me, that's my reward. So I just like doing things that I like doing, and I no longer. When I was younger, it was more of a rat race musically. You're trying to compete, and you try to listen to everything to see what they're doing, etc. Where should I be? But I don't do that anymore. I don't care. I'm sure there's lots of fantastic things out there, but I also know quite a lot that is great, and I'm just happy producing what I enjoy producing. It's what keeps me going. So I don't need to really know what everyone else is doing, because I don't want to do what they're doing. I will continue doing what I enjoy doing. So
Right.
but so I do disagree with a lot of people on things, but
Good. That's what you have to do as a creator. You have to do your own thing.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, David. Anybody else have a question or comments or anything like they'd like to?
Christopher.
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
When I'm writing, a little different. I mean, you do music, I do books, but I listen to a lot of music while I'm writing. I find it helps me get into a sequence or a scene. I've listened to your music when I've written, but I am wondering, especially since you started with guitar and then got into synthesizer, what your opinion was of a group that I've listened to quite a bit, Tangerine Dream.
Yeah. Well, okay. I love early Tangerine Dream.
Same.
As the years progressed, I lost interest, but the early, this is kind of pre-craft basically. I loved Phaedra and I love craft. Tangerine Dream, the early recordings, very much so. Later on, no, but the early recordings in the early 70s, very much so. Yeah. Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, I love. Still, one of my favorite Tangerine Dream tunes is what is it, "Love on a Real Train" or something like that. Love that tune, and the Phaedra album is just essential electronic music listening. I really followed them quite closely up until about 88, 89 time frame. By the time the 90s rolled around, I just didn't pay attention as much. But everything, from the 70s through to the end of the 80s, I loved. And they did some amazing soundtrack work as well. In fact, the other day, kind of embarrassed to admit this, I watched an old Stephen King movie called Firestarter that starred Drew Barrymore, a very young Drew Barrymore. And Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack for that. It was really, really kind of cool. And that's one of the reasons why I think I love the Netflix series Stranger Things, is that the gentlemen that do the original music for that are very heavily influenced by the likes of Tangerine Dream and John Carpenter, and just kind of that classic old school analog, minimal synthesizer stuff. I eat that stuff up, so I love it. Great stuff.
Just out of curiosity, have you listened to Carpenter's 3 Lost theme albums?
No,
Lost themes.
no,
They're amazing.
really. Okay, I'll have to look into that, because I've got a collection of John Carpenter's film stuff that he's done that has, like, one of my all-time favorite movie themes is the theme song that he did to Assault on Precinct 13, the original. I think the original film was 1976, one of his very first films, I believe. And so I've got that. It's got like the Halloween soundtrack stuff that he's done. Just a really, really amazing all around kind of do everything creative guy. I mean, he's a great writer, filmmaker, and amazing electronic musician as well. So that's cool. I'll have to look for that. I hadn't heard of that prior to now. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Feel free to take yourselves off mute. John, go for it.
Right. Actually, George, I was listening to Alien Skin earlier today, and it was while my dad was out shopping. I was alone at the house, so I had the speakers all to myself, so I could blast whatever I want. And I was listening to "She Looks Like Martin Gore" from 1984, and that song is incredible. And I want to know what's the story behind that, because everything about it is infectious. The melody, the hook, the lyrics, the song title is brilliant. I just love to know.
Thanks, John. Yeah, look, that's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's well, first of all, I'm a big Martin Gore fan, and the original, I guess the original began in the early 1980s, but I changed it a lot for the album. Okay, there's nothing, no great story to it. I think it's a good song too. I really like the song. She looks a lot like Martin Gore from 1984. It just rhymes as well.
Yeah,
it rhymes. It just as I was saying it to myself, I thought 1984. Yeah, okay, that rhyme. That's great. So I just took it from there. It's just, it began in the early 80s, or the idea of it. It wasn't actually titled that, or it didn't have the same lyrics, but just the embryo came from the early 1980s. And it's just tongue in cheek. It's just a, I think it's it's full of hooks. It's got the guitar part kind of, which doubles up with the synth, and like from the early 80s kind of guitar and synth playing together. It's just, it's actually attracted a lot of attention online, because of the name Martin Gore in it. So it's a lot of people have written in and say, Big Martin and Depeche, and we really love that. Yeah,
Right.
And I mean, I knew what I was doing. I mean, I knew that would obviously attract a lot of people's attention. Actually, I wanted to, it was from the album New Romance 1984, which is a play on New Romantics, but New Romance 1984. And that was released last year on a Russian label, which I worked with, called Centaur Records out of Moscow. And I wanted to actually call the album She Looks a Lot Like Martin Gore from 1984. I wanted to call that. But correctly, Tom, who runs the label, correctly told me, you probably shouldn't do that. Don't put his name on it. So I called it New Romance 1984, and he was right. But I just wanted that title because I knew it would attract more attention. But at least the song is there.
It does, and it's not something along the lines of like clickbait or anything. You get it because it's a great song title, and it is a really good melody.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as I said, I did want the album to be called that because obviously it would attract attention because of. But he said don't. So I agree with him now. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
Right on. Thank you, John. Anybody else have any questions? Jay, I see you kind of.
Oh, go ahead. I've just got something to say, but yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Our Kiwi guy there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just across the ditch there, George.
Okay, I can see you from here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, actually, I thought that was you earlier down the supermarket.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, it was yesterday.
A question I had for you is just back in the 80s, you mentioned that real life were playing everywhere. And something that's always struck me is that out of Melbourne around that period, in the 80s, you had real life, obviously, and you had Boom Crash Opera, and you had Crowded House, and you had Hunters and Collectors, and you had Models and Pseudo Echo. You had all of these bands that were doing really well. What do you attribute that to? Or do you just attribute that mostly to having a really rabid live scene there and a real audience for it?
Melbourne was always, not anymore, but Melbourne was always known as the live gig capital of Australia. That's where all the pubs really proliferated. There was a lot of venues there, and they used to attract a lot of people. That's where you used to go to listen to music, and the scene wasn't as good in Sydney. I think Melbourne was always known as the place. You mentioned Crowded House, but actually Crowded House came from your territory.
Yeah, New Zealand.
Came from New Zealand.
Yeah.
But George, of course, I know that Crowded House are from here, of course. But of course, there's the great argument about whether they're an Australian or a New Zealand band. But Neil Finner said they're a Melburnian band because the songs are mostly written in Melbourne.
Okay.
But their greatest album, Together Alone, was recorded in Kerikeri, which is just north of Auckland. So he lives here now, but I will accept that they're a Melburnian band with a Kiwi lead singer, and I'm prepared to leave it at that.
Yeah, look, I love Neil and Split Ends. I love Split Ends. And with his brother, and but yeah, Neil, both great songwriters and singers. They were brilliant, and of course they. What's the song in America? It's what's the Crowded House song? Big song.
Don't Dream It's Over.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I have to give Jay extra credit for even mentioning Boom Crash Opera. They've been one of my favorite bands for years, and I mention them to people, and most people are like, what is that? So yeah.
If I can mention, this is 1985, I think. My band at the time, Strange Silence, we did the support for the first Boom Crash Opera gig.
Oh wow!
Because Boom Crash Opera, there was different members from different Australian bands. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was like a mini supergroup kind of in Australia anyway. Right. And they were doing this. They had this industry gig where industry people came to see this first show. It was in a pub called the Tiger Lounge. It was packed. It was really packed. It wasn't a big place, but it was packed. And they were doing the they were doing the show, and we were doing the support. The guy who was promoting it on the night, because we had done well at that place for a few weeks, he gave us a gig, a support. So we supported them, and I remember being backstage beforehand with Dale Ryder, the singer.
Right.
And I didn't know who he was. And we finished, and we're saying, "Oh yeah, everyone's here just because of this band. They've got a name, and that's why everyone's here." And he said, "Yeah, I'm the actual singer from the band." I said, "Okay." Yeah. But he was a nice guy, nice, no issue. But I didn't know who he was. But yeah, so we did the support for their first gig, which was great, excellent. If I could just mention that, I forgot actually when you were talking about collaborations. I've worked with this French female singer called Robette.
Oh.
And in 2012, we did an album together, France and here, under the name of Plastic Art Noise. Great. What has happened now, she's about to release an album in France. She's about to release an album of Alien Skin songs. Now, she's chosen 10, 12 songs, Alien Skin songs, because she's been a big fan of my work for many years. And I've produced it with her. So what she's done is I produced the music, I did the music again, basically the same as my Alien Skin versions, but some variations. And she's rewritten the lyrics. She's singing French lyrics with my melodies.
Oh, nice.
Not translating them, but her own lyrics to my melodies. And the album is complete, and it's sensational. It's really, really beautiful. And for me, especially because originally they're my songs, so to hear them in this context with a female, she's got a very delicate, fragile, breathy kind of voice. It's really beautiful. And this whole album is really gorgeous. And for me to hear my original song sung in this way, it's just, they're like new songs to me. I'm actually falling in love with these songs, whereas before they were just something I did in the past. So it's a great piece of work. It's in French, and it'll be released. So I'm really sort of looking forward to that. And she's going to be doing some gigs in France once COVID settles. And it won't be with a band. It'll just be with a piano and a cello. So therefore, and she's going to record this on video. So I'll be hearing these songs in totally different context, songs that I created just on piano, cello, and voice. So that'll be, for me anyway, that'll be really exciting because I've never had anything like that happen. So to hear these songs, piano, cello, voice.
Yeah.
So that's been a beautiful collaboration with her, just by sending files across. So I'm really excited about that. So I forgot to mention that.
That sounds fantastic. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, you will once available.
Cool.
I'll let you know.
Right on. Any other questions for George or myself? Anyone? Feel free to take yourselves off mute if you have a question or have a comment you'd like to make. We good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me tonight, and massive thanks especially to George for taking a little bit of time out of his Sunday to have a conversation with us here on Saturday on this part of the world. For those that are watching this on YouTube after the fact, please, if you like what you've watched here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and click the little bell so you can get notifications anytime we do another video here. And speaking of the Soul of Synth-Pop Spotlight series, tomorrow night we are doing a conversation with synthwave icon Mr. Michael Oakley, and really excited about that one, based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And so that'll be tomorrow evening, and I hope you guys can join us for that. With that, please make sure that you support George and all of the wonderful artists that I feature on both my radio show and on the Zoom Spotlight series. And one of the best ways to support George is to go to Bandcamp, his Bandcamp page, and purchase that brand new album of his called Cold War Pop, which, if I'm being perfectly honest, is right now probably the top contender for my choice for album of the year so far.
Nice.
We're halfway in, and seriously, folks, if you haven't heard it yet, Cold War Pop is a tremendous album. I'm going to play 2 tracks from the album tomorrow during the first hour of my show. So if you tune into my show, make sure you listen to that, and got some other great stuff coming up as well. But George, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have not only been somebody that supports your music, but to be a friend of yours. Thank you so much for just being the wonderful person that you are, and for your music, which continues to inspire and inspire all of us, truly. Best of wishes with whatever you've got working on. And if there's anything that I can do via my small platform with the soul of synth pop, just say the word, my friend, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to help you out in that regard. So with that, folks, again, everybody have a wonderful evening or afternoon if you happen to be on the other side of the international date line. But thank you for joining us, and everybody just have a wonderful weekend, and be well, be awesome, and be nice to bunnies.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Spending 1.5 hours with us. Okay, cheers.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jim.
Bye,
Bye, George.
Thank you so much, Jim. Always have a great time. Cheers.
You got it. Tacos y
Bye, everyone.
albóndigas.
That's right.
La
Bye-bye.
lucha.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh.